Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the BCP Licensing Subcommittee. The first item on this morning's agenda is the election of chair. Do I have any nomination?
I'd like to propose Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard.
I would like to second Councillor Flagg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keddy. Item 2 on this morning's agenda. Housekeeping first.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptop. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Item 2 on this morning's agenda, apologies for absence. Michelle?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest with regard to the items of business on this morning's agenda? Councillor Hilliard?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Keddy?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4, protocol for public speaking at licensing hearings. The protocol for public speaking at licensing subcommittee hearings is included with the agenda sheet for noting. Item 5, temptation. 1 Yelverton Road, Bournemouth, BH1 1DA. An application has been received for the renewal of the sexual entertainment venue licence for the premises known as Temptation, 1 Yelverton Road, Bournemouth, to permit relevant entertainment to continue for a further 12-month period. The matter is brought before the subcommittee for determination. I will now ask each participant to introduce themselves and state their role. I'm Councillor David Flagg and I'm the chair for this morning's meeting. Councillor Keddy?
Councillor Alistair Keddy, Queen's Park and Charminster Ward.
Paul Hilliard, Muddyford, Stampit and West Haycliffe councillor.
Thank you, members. We also have joining us this morning Councillor Judy Richardson, who is a reserve member, not required to participate in this morning's meeting, but Councillor Richardson is remaining in the room for observing and for training purposes.
Good morning, Sarah Rogers, Principal Licensing Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Joanne McNamara, Legal Advisor to the Subcommittee.
Michelle Cutler, Licensing Subcommittee Clerk.
Rebecca Rhodes, Democratic Services, here to observe today.
Thank you. And for the applicant, I have Mr. Robert Sutherland.
Correct, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Naresh Kumar Mal.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Alistair Weatherstone, who's joining us on the Teams. Good morning, Mr. Weatherstone.
Thank you.
And then we have a representation from Mrs. Susan Stockwell.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Before I run through the procedure, please may I check that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and any person who wishes to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak has been identified. If there are no comments, I will take this as correct. I will now explain the proposed procedure and order of speaking for the hearing as follows. The licensing officer presents the report. The applicant will make their application. Questions of the applicant by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. The objector will make their representations. Questions of the objector, members of the subcommittee to go first. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. Where possible, notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I will now ask all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure or make representations. Mr. Sutherland?
No comments, sir.
Thank you. Naresh Kumar Mal?
No comment.
Thank you. Mr. Weatherstone?
No comment, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stockwell?
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah Rogers?
No comment, thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Joanne McNamara?
No, that's fine, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Finally, please may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chair, and there will be no cross-examination of party. I will now ask the licensing officer to present the report. Sarah.
Thank you. Application is made by Admiral Bars Hampshire Limited for the renewal of the sexual entertainment venue licence held at 1 Yalberton Road for a further 12-month period. The premises have been operating as an adult lap dancing club for nearly 20 years. The premises have been operating as Temptation under the current ownership since October 2021. The application made complies with the relevant legislation, and the necessary site and newspaper notices were published in accordance with that legislation. In addition to that, notice of the application was published on BCP Council's website. As a result of the public consultation, 1 objection was received. There were no objections received from any of the responsible authorities as we consult as identified under the Licensing Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Do members have any questions for the officer at all at this point?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Right, can I now call upon Mr. Sutherland then to address the committee, please?
So, thank you. Can I, before I start, Seb, just make it clear that often when one is in a room and with a client and dealing with an application, there may be bits of paper which are passed between and post-it notes, etc. It's all understandable. Obviously, Mr. Weatherstone is on a different continent today, so we are connected via WhatsApp. So it may be that either myself or Mr. Mal may be looking at our phone purely to deal with an issue that Mr. Weatherstone has asked me to focus on. So just be aware of that. So I didn't want you to think that I was being rude in any way this morning. In relation to this particular application, so I'm proposing to just deal with the representation and objection against, if I may. I think there are 4 things which are highlighted as part of that. In relation to the statutory provisions, you're aware, of course, that there are mandatory grounds for refusing and the discretionary grounds for refusing. There are no mandatory grounds, and so I shall focus purely on the 4 ones which are highlighted by the objector. The first issue is in relation to the suitability of the applicant, and there's reference, and in fact within your papers there's a copy of a statement that was produced by Mr. Weatherstone for a hearing. I believe it was 2022, but I may be wrong. It was certainly online, and you've got the statement in your papers. There's an issue about reference to the premises being called strip club. My understanding, certainly of having reread it at the time, was that there was an issue about the outside display of the premises, and Mr. Weatherstone was accepting that the outside of the display should be changed in line with the requirements of the committee, and there was an issue about reference to the word strip club. Previously, the committee had indicated that premises called gentlemen's clubs and hence the name of the premises was changed. My understanding was that there was nothing from the committee which required the reference to Script Club to be changed. Mr. Weatherstone said then, and I'm sure would say again today if he was here, if there's a difficulty with the name, if it's highlighted, then of course he will change it. But my understanding is that there hasn't been, certainly in the renewal for years since the last hearing, photographs of the frontage of the premises have been provided to the authority, and indeed a photograph of the frontage of the premises was provided to the authority following the requirement to remove certain images off the window, and there's no issues or complaints being raised. But if it is an issue, then please draw attention to it. So that in my submission does not make Mr. Weatherstone unsuitable to hold a licence. There's reference to Watford and a number of things happening in Watford. I think all I need to say in relation to that is that I've acted for Mr. Weatherstone since this new legislation. I'm calling it new. That's a reflection of my age. Of course, it goes back to 2010. It's now 14 years on, and I'm still calling it new. So forgive me. And dealt with all applications in Watford, and at the end of the day, the licensing authority have accepted that he is a suitable person to run premises under a sexual entertainment venue license. I take it no further than that. There is reference to a bankruptcy. I understand that that was in the last century. I don't propose to go into any more detail. It's so long ago that I would ask you to treat it as being irrelevant for the purposes of today. The next issue raised is then about suitability of the premises. You've obviously got the plans of the premises attached. You can obviously consider them. Your officers have recently been to the premises to confirm that they're satisfied. When the plans were changed a year or so back, at the time, the fire officer also attended and went around the premises, and we discussed various different things and requirements from them, and they signed off the premises as well. The fire authority have far greater powers than the licensing authority in relation to the layout of the premises, and if they weren't content with the safety of the premises, they would have either required us to improve or would have prohibited them from being used. Neither of those things have taken place, so I would commend the internal layout of the premises as being suitable. In relation to, there's reference to the smoking area. The smoking for customers and for the performers is to the front of the premises, and they will go either side of the front door. There is a security officer at the front door, so the area where performers would smoke is separate from the customers and is supervised by the door supervisor to make sure that there's no contact and that the performer is allowed their own time, as it were, outside. In relation to smoking, there is a practice that they have an overcoat, or two overcoats, in fact, at the premises to allow two of the performers to go outside and smoke at any one time. It's a way that of I suppose controlling the number of smokers outside, but it also means that they're suitably attired when they're outside. So again, I would submit that that's no reason for refusal. The objector then goes on in relation to location. I think that I would address that at this stage, in that I'm not aware of any changes since the licence was last renewed, which would be last summer, as there are no objections to it, which are relevant in relation to this. On my walking through Bournemouth, as I do from time to time, and I had an opportunity to do that last night, it's clear that there are changes within the centre of Bournemouth, but I don't see that anything has changed in this particular locality. It's still located next door but one, I think, to a casino. I would say it's in an adult entertainment area of the town. That brings us, I think, to the public sector equality duty. It's put forward by the objector that that its single focus is to protect women, I suppose, like herself, who don't want premises like this in within their town or within their area. I would submit that it's much wider than that. And in this particular instance, there are people who work at the premises, whether because they're employed there or because they perform there. They are women, and they obviously would suffer substantially if the licence was refused. I would put it on that basis. I think it's in some ways may balance out in relation to the effect in relation to a licence like this. We welcome all within the premises, and by that I do not just refer to race and colour or nationality, but I also relate to sex, sexual orientation. All are welcome at the premises. Sarah, unless I can assist you further, which I'm sure there may be some questions, then please ask.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Sutherland at all? Councillor Kelly.
I do, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Sutherland. I just wanted to pick up what you mentioned about the location in the centre of Bournemouth and how there haven't been significant material changes in your views since the last licence review. What I would say is the location is changing. There is an increase in residential units, which is leading to more families with children moving into the area. There's an increase in student accommodation, which potentially leads to more vulnerable young female residents living in close proximity to the venue. Another ongoing material change is the opening of the Livingstone School in Lansdowne, which is within a mile of the SEV. They are increasing their pupil cohort year on year. I believe they have 3 year groups at the moment. My main concern with these applications is the exposure to children to sexualised content. I also note the work that the venue has taken to reduce exposure of sexual content in the window display. Whilst these changes are incremental, I do feel that at some point we are going to reach a threshold with this. I would welcome any further suggestions from the applicant to reduce the exposure of sexual content to children in this context. One of those things for me would potentially be removing the wording strip club from the front. The reason for this being, I have walked through Bournemouth with my children to go for a family meal, and this is not directly relevant to this particular application, but my 8-year-old pointed to a certain club and asked me, what does that mean? What happens in there? And if I take that as an example that could be applied to any children walking past these venues. How do we reduce that harm is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keddy. Did you want to answer that, Mr. Sutherland?
Certainly, in relation to, I think it's about the visibility of the premises within the centre of the town. As has been indicated, and I don't think this has changed, Mr. Weatherstone has indicated that if he needed to remove the word strip club from it, or the word strip, I think is the issue, then that can be achieved. I think at the time, as I say, it was identifying what the premises is, and so that no one could go to the premises or enter it by mistake. It's very clear. What it says is what it is, and that we would say is positive. I can understand why there may be a preference for that word to be removed. I think, as I say, Mr. Weatherstone was prepared to remove it. I probably come from a different school of thought. With my children, and I have a lot of children, in the sense of, if something is clear and obvious and I'm being asked a question, then it enables me to be clear and obvious in my response. And therefore, whereas I can understand the difficulty, for example, if a premise is called Gentlemen's Club, as to what does that mean and how does, what goes on there. In my view, it's always black and white. It's a strip club. What does that mean? And I think it's fairly clear. Should we not be telling children that these things exist and happen? I come from a school where I think it's healthy to do that, but I accept that that's not my decision. It's obviously down to the committee, and if they feel that the word strip should be removed, then I don't think there'll be a problem in doing so. I think that's the only bit that I mean there may be, the premises itself doesn't open during the day. It opens at night, well after dark, whatever time of year it is, and I think it will be unlikely that certainly any persons going to school would be passing by the premises at the time it's open.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. So again, yeah, similar to Councillor Keddy, I would probably favour the word strip being removed. You mentioned the opening times 9 p.m. Are there any activities going on during the day which could be seen, like training or whatever, in and out access? Thank you.
You probably know the frontage of the premises very well, and so forgive me if I'm putting it down to a very basic level. There are a number of doorways to the premises on the street level. The main entrance tends to be the one that's in the middle, I believe, which leads straight into a reception area. There's no entertainment areas on the ground floor. They're all upstairs. Coming down to the timings of when they're open, although they generally open about 9 o'clock, they probably don't have customers until a little bit after that, I would have said, and probably aren't really at their busiest until probably around about 11 or after. There are no activities, as I understand it, going on through the day, which would give rise to concerns. Again, this isn't relevant, I suppose, to these particular premises, but I do act for sexual entertainment venues around the country, and I have found that one of the issues, one of the concerns often about sexual entertainment venues is that they are premises which are dark and are empty, and there is a fear sometimes about what goes on. And certainly in some locations like that, in some city centres, the premises will operate with training and other activities to get people into them. Now, I appreciate that may not fit comfortably with yourselves, but it's about, I think, it's about some form of education. It's about allowing people access to the premises so that there isn't fear there. But in relation to this particular premises, there's nothing.
Okay. And another point, Mr. Sunderland, you mentioned the dancers come out for smoke break. Is there not a rear entrance where they could do that? Thank you.
No, the only entrances I believe are to the front. I think there is an emergency exit which goes to out to a yeah, but I think the only place where we could actually smoke is at the front. Generally speaking, the performers are self-employed, and generally speaking, for that reason, will probably want to spend more time within the premises than outside of the premises for for their own reasons. So it's usually they'll go out for a break, cigarette, and then we'll go smoking back in.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. I'm after a bit of clarification, really. Can I ask the officer just to confirm that the items within the previous minute were addressed by the applicant? Thank you.
Yes, it was my understanding that they were.
And for the sake of confusion, it was a sign in the window and not the fascia sign above the premises.
Yes, there were a couple of email addresses that were on the window display, and they were removed, so it just left the symbol and a fire sign as per the pictures.
Thank you for that.
So if it helps, I think there was also some silhouettes that the committee, if I can assist your officer, I think there were some silhouettes that the committee felt that shouldn't have been there, and they were removed.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Stockwell, did you have any questions for the applicant at all?
Yes. Chair, yes, I do have a which I understand go by you at home. Firstly, that the applicant mentioned at the outset that there were no mandatory grounds for refusal in the objection. However, my understanding is that it's a mandatory ground for refusal if you find that the applicant is actually the wrong person, that they are not the operator, and that the operator is Silverleaf Leisure, as displayed on a website advertising the club. So that's that there is a mandatory ground put forward in my objection, but that's for you to take advice on. I mean, it's also without repeating.
So your question is.
My question is: has he perhaps overlooked the fact that a mandatory ground has been put forward in the objection?
Mr. Sutherland?
I don't see that as a mandatory ground. I think and I think it's set out in the statement from Mr. Weatherstone as to how he structures the business. My understanding was that when that was raised, the advice and response from the committee was that there was nothing wrong in that regard. Even if I'm wrong on that, I'm not even convinced that it's a mandatory ground. I think mandatory grounds are very clear, and it wouldn't relate to what has been said by Mrs. Stockwell.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland.
Well, it's in my objection, so for you to decide.
Do you have any further questions?
Yes, I do, Chair. As far as the smokers being separated, by the door staff into performers and customers, which is understandable to go along with the general thrust of the license, which is that they are really not supposed to get together too closely inside the club or outside the club. From my walking down the street in the daytime and looking at the cigarette ends outside, which are not many, in fairness, I would say they're cleared pretty well, but they're fairly sparse compared to some other licensed premises I've seen, that there is no obvious separate area. Now, it's quite possible that there are people smoking during the day, not that I've ever seen anyone there during the day, that there are people smoking after everyone's gone home, including the door supervisors, and that's why there isn't a gap between one place people are smoking and another place. So I would just ask the applicant, through you, if he's absolutely sure that this separation of customer and performer is happening outside, because the cigarette ends tell a very different story.
Thank you. Mr. Sutherland?
I'm grateful to the indication, so that there are not many cigarette ends outside. The area is cleaned at the end of the evening, so that would probably explain why there are not many. We would say not any, certainly when we close, but it's possible that they may blow there or may be dropped there as people pass. In relation to the separation of the area, as you face the premises, the performers will go to the left of the to the front door, and the customers will go to the right. And there is clear separation, and there is a door supervisor in between the two.
And can I ask, that working model, how long has that been in place, please?
So I'm going to show my age, I'm afraid here. I acted for the previous operator at these particular premises, and it's my understanding that was in place then. So I would say, so probably that's been in place for this operator since they took over, and for the previous operator probably since before this legislation came into effect. So pre 2010, obviously.
Thank you for that. And clearly no issues in that period of time.
I can't remember any particular issues in relation to the smoking areas. No.
Thank you. Did you have any further questions?
Yes, yes, Chair, that the applicant's advisor mentions that the officers have recently been to the premises to see if it's okay. Now, my understanding, obviously I don't know every last movement of your officers, but from reading the officers' report that's online, there was mention there of 2 instances of breach of no touching rule being reported. And on both, I believe that didn't result in a visit to the premises. That was the way I read it. I may have misread. So I'm a little confused as to where this recent visit that's been mentioned, whether that happened. If I guess I need to word that as a question. Could I just ask if you could take clear instructions on that point?
I think I'd like to refer to the licensing officer, because I do note that there is an item in the agenda regarding these issues. Sarah,
I can answer that. The recent visit to the premises was made as a result of your continued questioning about the plans. So I wanted to be in a position to say today, as I knew you would bring it up, that the layout of the plans is so I walked floor by floor with the manager and made sure that the plans were as they are, and I can confirm that they are all in order.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stockwell.
And yes, my My last question, Chair, is to ask whether the applicant has considered the women who have suffered from losing work already from the continued licensing of these clubs in the centre. I've worked in one that's been closed for a long time, and I would say that as women, we have largely been driven out of the centre of Bournemouth by the licensing of the strip clubs. The harassment that is mentioned, obviously, again, in my objection, is an issue. You don't want to work late if you're working in retail. And have you considered those of us who have already lost work because of the licensing of your premises? It's not the women inside that my objection's about. My objection is very much about issues beyond the club where you don't have control of the customers.
I'm going to ask the legal advisor to step in.
Yes.
Please, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Stockwell. You've just got to be careful about the question. You've said people have lost a job in retail because of what goes on at the premises. I think you need to back that up by evidence. To what you're saying is retail premises are closing because of the premises.
Absolutely. I've worked in Beals. You'll be familiar as local councillors, but I can explain that if you stand outside the premises in question, i.e. Club Temptation, and you look down the road towards Old Christchurch Road, then the area you see, the large open area that's been all smartened up and lots of public money gone into it, is Beal Place. And this was brought up 2 years ago by other councillors as well. So that's Beal Place, and a lot of effort gone into trying to bring in families and regenerate the area. And Beals itself, where I stood in the upstairs in what was the canteen, looking, I didn't work there for very long, I'm not going to over-egg it, but where I stood looking down onto the premises now occupied by Mr. Weatherstone's company. And I asked curiously who had these flags outside. I thought it was some sort of embassy. And the women I worked with, who were not particularly showing any signs of neurosis or getting things out of control or terribly anything but prudery, I would say, quite a close atmosphere. They looked down and they said, you must never, ever walk past there. You mustn't walk past it. And they meant in the daytime as well. They said that that was a strip club. And that they gave the impression very strongly that it was not safe to walk down that road.
Mrs. Stockwell, my view is that you haven't brought within your objection any documented evidence of what you're addressing the committee with. So therefore, I don't feel that the committee could take that into consideration this morning with regards to this hearing.
I can give you another example, but it's repeating what's in my objection.
What I'm saying is that you've not brought to the table any documented evidence to back up what you're saying to the committee. That is my point. So I'm therefore addressing the committee to listen to you with regards to your implication that because there's a business up the road that people have lost their jobs through that business. And I don't think that's correct. Do you have any further questions, Mrs. Stockwell?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the applicant at all? No. Okay, in which case then we'll move on to Mrs. Stockwell. Could you address the committee, please? And could I remind you that we are fully aware of the information that you've provided to the council, and we'd like you to expand on your objection rather than repeat what you've already told the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I will really try not to repeat. Just to confirm, I wanted to, on my kind of list, I've got at the top of the list, wanted to update on what was in my objection. And that's to say that I'm very grateful to your officer who has managed to get plans to me, which I could read and absolutely find. So thank you very much. Also an update is that the wording that I was complaining about in my objection, which was a list of excuses to give a partner for having been out at an establishment such as this, I'm very pleased to say that although they were there intermittently, they used to come and go. Last night and this morning, I haven't been able to see them on the website for Club Temptation or the couple of other ones of Mr. Weatherstone's clubs that he still has. So they've gone from there, which is fantastic. The only place I could still find them being used, and it's pretty much word for word for what I put in my objection, was in a club that I believe he no longer has in Southend, but they have kept the tradition of that wording going on their website. I can also say that the image that was there 2 years ago and was there when I wrote my objection, that's gone. The one which was kind of intermittently on the contact page, which shows two quite Nordic looking women, I suppose, quite stylized, and they're definitely breaching the no touching rule. They have, I don't know if you're familiar with the James Bond Goldfinger. There's a sort of effect on them as if they've had, done by technical means, I'm sure, as if they sort of got shimmery over their skin, and they're quite distinctive, but they're not there. So I'm pleased to see that they're gone, because the issue is that when you use an image showing breach of the no touching rule, then you're giving the impression that that's what's happening in the club, unless you say, oh, put a little rider on it saying, oh, by the way, you won't be seeing this in the club. However, the gallery, if you use Google to search gallery Watford Bournemouth Temptation, it still brings up quite a large selection of images of women who the indication is that they're from the Watford club, but performing in Bournemouth, and if I've read it correctly. And those images include breach of the no touching rule. They're not all. They're just sprinkled in amongst them. The one with Pandora and Jamie, where they're sexual touching, is definitely still on there last night. So I would just say that that's not, that's an update on my objection, to say that that bit's still there. I'd also question whether we really have a supply of women who want to work in these clubs, enough for Temptation to need to be licensed, if performers are having to be brought down from the Watford club. The last point that I wanted to make was that the licensing of these clubs, as I'm sure some of you remember from being councillors for longer than nearly as long as I've had anything to do with licensing, and that's that you don't need permission from the police to be able to refuse this. It used to be in their gift to decide whether or not to license strip clubs, and it's not now, it's in your gift. I've given you all the law, the facts staring you in the face. Really, this is an administrative decision, so the only people you're answerable to are your voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stockwell. Do members have any questions at all, Mr. Stockwell?
No, sir.
No. Mr. Sutherland, did you have any questions at all?
There are a number of things I disagree and don't accept that are being said, so I'm not sure it's going to be helpful for me to exercise those in front of you today.
No, we're purely dealing with questions, Mr. Sutherland. Did Mr. Weatherstone wish to contribute at all? Any questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right. So if there are no questions, what I'd like to do now then is move on to the summing up. And can I ask Mrs. Stockwell if you would sum up, please, in terms of your objection, with anything you may have omitted to address the committee with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably the best summing up I can do is to say that the women of Bournemouth would rather like their town centre back. Thank you. And it's in your gift to give it to us.
Thank you for that. Mr. Sutherland, do you have anything to add or bring to the committee's attention at all?
Sorry, got the microphone. There are 4 areas which have been highlighted, and I've addressed all 4. I think the only additional aspects which has come out through the hearing is in relation to an argument which I don't accept in relation to the applicant of this particular licence. As is clear from the record and from Mr. Weatherstone's statement, he has asked me to make it clear to you again that he owns both of the companies involved, and all of the information that's required by the authority has been provided to the authority so that they can check and assure themselves that he is and the companies are suitable to hold the licence. The only additional thing, sir, that I would say is that whilst Stockwell can talk for herself and can express her view to the committee, she cannot speak for all of the women in Bournemouth. I do not accept that all of the women in Bournemouth do not want this premises to continue with an SEV licence. We have customers who are male and female who attend. We have the performers are obviously female. We employ staff who are female and male. All of those persons would want the committee to grant this licence. So I don't accept what Mrs. Stockwell is saying, and I would commend the application to the committee and ask you to renew it again for a period of 12 months.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. I will now conclude the hearing. At the end of this meeting, the subcommittee will adjourn in private with the legal advisor and the clerk to deliberate. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held, in accordance with the regulations. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I'll say thank you for your attendance, and you are free to leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now end the live stream.